Connie here, doing kind of a quick breakdown of a fight I had recently. I'm starting with my footage because, in all seriousness, I don't care if I tear myself apart. So this is one of my fights from Lake E Fecht. Lake E Fecht was interesting. There were three levels of points you could score in the Rapier division. For Rapier, only cuts to the head scored. So cuts to the torso, legs, arms, or the rest of the upper opening were worth 0 points. From there, cuts to the head and thrusts to arms or legs were worth 1 point. Um, and thrusts to a deep target were worth 2 points. But if you had a successful blade grab or grapple into a cut or thrust to a valid target, you gained an additional control point. So this should be a fairly short fight. We're going to break this down exchange by exchange. I will do my best to explain what's happening, and we will kind of go from there. So let's start with the first touch. So salute starts here. I rush in, and effectively, if we play this back at a reduced speed, and this was a problem I was having this whole tournament, I was really rushing too much, is I rush back. Andrew does the smart thing. So again, fight starts. I think I have control of the blade. I thrust. Andrew parries wide, tries to control my blade, and thrusts with that low thrust. If we, again, just wind back a millisecond, you can see his sword is here. What happened is, as I was backing off, his point went right into my stomach, but he did not have control, so he was awarded 2 points. That brings us to the next exchange, which is honestly not that different from the previous one. So let's watch this at full speed and then take it back. So the judges make their call, as judges are wont to do. I'm honestly not sure if Andrew's thrust landed or not, and I can't remember, but we'll say it did. He had the line. It's what it is. So next pass, again, the next exchange starts. We close to measure. I gain and find his blade in court. I go for a direct thrust that Andrew parries wide, at which point I immediately snap around with a cut and land the cut to the side of his head. So let's take that back just a step and play it at a slightly lower speed. We're both being extremely active with our footwork here. In this exchange, I definitely kind of dictate control of the tempo. I'm going to use my cursor to kind of show where the blades are going as this happens. But if we watch this, there is a find and gain thrust, barely parried. And if you see where Andrew's body is, he actually circles right, which was the right thing to do here. So in Rapier, nonlinear movement can be your friend when you're doing a good job cutting an angle, and he does a great job of that and keeps me from getting the thrust. From there, he tries to bring his point back online, but I've closed measure enough that I do the cut around, which will travel from here, to the side of his head, and close out his blade as well. Bam! Well, his blade does nothing, and I bail out of measure in a blind panic while he tries to throw the afterblow. In this exchange, the afterblow tempo being extremely short definitely saved me a couple fights, but in this case, that is now 1 point for me. All right, so that brings us to the next pass. We just got done the cut to the head. Once again, the judges do judge things, and we are back into the fray. I get my singular point. The score is now 2-1 in Andrew's favor. So from there, we go to the next pass. Let's see it in real time and then break it down. Here, Andrew's pressuring forward. I'm doing a good job maintaining the distance I want to be at. Andrew's trying to circle. So here, this was a good idea with bad final execution. So once again, what happens is Andrew's trying to cut an angle, trying to circle me, and this actually brings up one of my biggest pet peeves in fencing, and that is orbiting. Andrew's doing better than most here, but he's starting to try to orbit, but the rings are small. In MMA, there's a concept called cutting the cage or closing the line, and that's kind of what I am trying to do here because Andrew's trying to use his circling to get to an advantageous position and dictate the terms of engagement, and I can't let him. So, if you watch from about here, right, the fight starts, I'm pressuring in, trying to look for my attack. Andrew's trying to get to a happier side. I'm doing a good job keeping him directly in my reticle the whole time. I again thrust in. The thrust is barely parried. I close his sword down, grab it, and throw a, unfortunately, flat cut to the head. So this was a weird fight for me because Andrew is one of the few people who, mad credit to him, does a really good job of circling offline. If you actually watch where we started on this line here, and by the end of the pass, Andrew is doing a good job cutting an angle, but I have prior experience with this. I am keeping him in my sights and lined up the whole time so I can launch my attack. But he's doing a good job of reducing his target area with his circling, and if you notice the way he circles, he's circling to my weak side. So when you're circling, if you do choose to do it, you want to circle from here to of the opposing fencer's line, not from here to here or the inside of the opposing fencer's line. This is because if you circle into me, you actually give me a bigger target area. If you circle to my outside, you give me a smaller target area. So this is a really cool little development that Andrew made, because the last two passes, I didn't give him time to do this. Here he had the time, and he did a really good job. And that's actually why my direct thrust that you see in the next second or two misses, right? So if we continue watching, he's circling. I think I have the line changed through, changed through. He's cutting me off. He's cutting me off. He starts to pressure into measure. I launch myself, right? And because Andrew circled to the inside, he reduced his target area and was able to clear my sword out of the way. From here, things kind of fall apart for him, but I was able to grab his sword, throw the flat cut to the head, and get the exchange reset. In the end, this advantageous for me because it lets me get a control thrust on the next pass. But feedback for both fencers so far. Andrew, I am doing a good job of closing off the line with my sword, but not so much of getting my body offline or maintaining those lines once I've found them. What Andrew is doing really well is if we take a look at this exchange again, he is really putting me at a disadvantageous position by circling to my outside line. He's keeping me from feeling comfortable enough to launch a shot, but I'm a really impatient fencer, and he takes huge advantage of that. Bam, here's my attack. He just misses, beautiful void backwards. Honestly, the only thing that's keeping me in this fight right now is I have more experience in a ring than Andrew. Andrew was a very new fencer, and this is the finals pool of his first real tournament. The fact that he made it this far is hugely impressive, and I am just really proud of the guy. So, let's move on to the next pass. This brings us to the fourth exchange of this fight. So far, we've seen good footwork from Andrew and good follow-ups from me. Let's see how this continues to shake out. So, and let's watch the pass. So, this is another fairly simple pass. It happens pretty quick, but the end result is still fairly interesting, right? So let's watch that back. The fight starts off. Andrew's trying to pressure in this time because he is now at a points deficit. I'm trying to pressure in, and what happens is pretty simple. In rapier, there is something called a hand parry. If someone is thrusting in a rapier fight, you are capable of just slapping your sword out of their sword out of your way with your slappy hand, right? And that's what happens here. So again, we watch this. I'm pressuring in. I start my direct attack. Andrew leaves the bind entirely and tries to come with an overline thrust to my face, probably thinking that he had the line or that he could force a double and keep the points 2-1 instead of more. What I do here is take my hand from center line to the off line, slap his thrust out of the way, grab his blade, and finish my direct attack. So at super low speed, boom, big nothing burger, he tries to poke me with a thrust, I just hop out of measure. I pressure in, I pressure in, I pressure in, and right now, I launch my attack, he launches his, I get my hand on his sword to clear it out of the way, boom, and stab him in the guts. This, because of the rule set, winds up being a 3-point shot for me, which puts Andrew in a massive hole with one pass left. The score is for me, to Andrew, which means to win the fight, he needs a control point, and to tie the fight, he needs a deep target shot. In limited exchange formats, I honestly don't like them because of that, right? It forces that panic response in the other fencer's fencing, and that is never a fun spot to be in. On to the next pass. So this is the last pass, right? Very, very simple exchange with a very, very simple direct attack. So let's go back, mute this, and watch that again at a slower speed. So, yeah, at this point, Andrew's in a hole. He has to play catch up. I have a 2-point lead, so Andrew either needs a thrust to a deep target or a 3-point exchange. So, let's watch this. We both pressure in. I am trying to be the aggressor here. I get my strong on Andrew's blade and launch a shot right down the pipeline. So in rapier fencing, if we take this back and actually look at what's happened, there is kind of 3 stages to a fight, right? The first stage is out of measure. This is not really a quantifiable measure, but if we look at how Capofero talks about measure, there are 3 possible ranges you can engage a fight in. The first is lunging range, the second is extension of the arm, and the third is close measure or grappling range. So if we watch this exchange in slow motion, this is a long range according to Capofero exchange. So let's do this again. I close the line. Right here, I get my mid on Andrew's weak and immediately fire a shot. This is a little rushy, but if we watch right here, boom, right there, I have control of Andrew's blade. This is a quick find into an immediate direct attack. Bam. Right to the neck, lockout thrust, and this winds up winning me the match with a final score of 6-2. So, let's do a quick breakdown of strengths and weaknesses of both fighters. Right, now then, so this was an interesting fight. In general, there are 3 skills you want to look at in a rapier fencer, right? The first is distance, the second is timing, and the third is blade work. So to make my life easy, I used to be in academia. I'm going to score everything from an A, from like a D to an A. Now then, in this fight, honestly, I'm not giving either of us an A for anything. To be very blunt, my timing was good. The big thing I was able to capitalize on in this fight is if you watch the clips of Andrew, he does a lot of change throughs out of measure, which puts him in a hugely advantageous, or which gives me a lot of tempos in which to just fire something down the pipeline. Pretty much every early rapier master, which is what I specialize in, talks about firing shots down the pipeline when someone does a change through or comes under your blade. That is basically free real estate. But if you look at my fencing, the bounciness doesn't matter. It's an old habit from karate. It's not the biggest positive or negative, but it's a thing I need to work on. For Andrew, what I would say is I want him to really look for a increased sense of knowing when to find and gain the blade. I think that would help him here immensely because he's never really trying to control my line of attack. He is just moving around me trying to outfight me. And that's exactly what I want out of an opponent, honestly. It gives me a lot of free real estate to do direct attacks or close your lines and take my own shot, which is how I got him in the final pass. From there, I would say that in terms of timing, I would give myself a B minus, right? I was able to fire down the pipeline for a couple of his shots or when he was mid-step, so my timing was not bad in this fight, but it could have been better. For distance, I'm giving myself another B minus, which is probably too lenient, but whatever. I tended a lot and rush a lot, which really screwed up my distance measurement and made the fight a bit more of a mess than it otherwise could be. So, and then finally, for blade work, I am giving myself a C. I never really did anything advanced or fancy. I just closed lines and fired shots, which was a little too reckless. For Andrew, I am actually giving his distance a solid B. Especially with his circling and cutting my lines off using his movement, he did a really good job. But his blade really sought to control my blades, so I'm giving him a C there. And for his timing, he never really fully understood when I was vulnerable and when I wasn't, which is how I was able to score that grapple on him and that final thrust. Know that honestly, I was giving him a lot of tempo to hit me with those panic change throughs. So I'm giving him a B minus there. So overall, my average is a B minus. His average is a C. Andrew has a lot of potential to grow and become a good fencer, and I look forward to seeing more from him in the future.